with the Ravens beating the Bucs on Thursday night, how would you assess the game? And do you think the Bucs can salvage this season, knowing the way that they played the last couple weeks?
I mean, the Bucs we knew were a struggling team, an injured team as well, because most of their secondary was either out or just not available for this game. You're looking at the box score, and obviously, Kyle and I didn't necessarily. Well, I didn't see the first half. I was out running errands, going grocery shopping and stuff. By the way, guys, going to Publix after 8 p.m. Perfect time. Just in case anybody was wondering, absolute perfect time. No one's there. They're restocking the shelves. I don't got to wait for anybody. I don't got to look for products. It's like right there. But anyway, um, I'm looking at this and I'm just saying I see two numbers here: 231 versus 44. In case you were wondering, that is the running yards per team. And take a guess who's got 231. The Ravens. Gus Edwards has 65, Kenyon Drake had 62, Lamar Jackson had 43, Devin Duvernay had 33, Justice Hill had 28, and then we have the Bucs. 44 rushing yards, 2.9 per carry. Now I know what you're thinking. Oh, well, didn't we just say that the Bucs were down? Da, 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 da? Yeah, it was 10-3 at halftime. Once again, another instance to where they abandoned the run game way too early. Tom Brady's getting hit. Tom Brady's getting sacked, pressured. The offensive line, the penalties. I mean, you name it. These are not excuses. These are facts. The Bucs did not look disciplined in that fourth quarter. They looked absolutely atrocious. Tom Brady was roasting them on that drive before this last one, where they had to end in a field goal because they were holding, and then you had what was it? Legal shift or something like that.
A false
Regardless, the
start. It was a
point
false
is
start.
a
It was a
false start. Excuse me. You're just looking at this and saying there's nothing you can do. It's one of those games. It's just they were falling apart at the seams. Tom didn't look good this game. The running game didn't look good. The play calling was questionable. I mean, for God's sakes, we're talking about the greatest quarterback of all time. And this is probably the first time he's gone through adversity like this, like Kyle said, but this is potentially the first time in his career he's ever been 2 games under 500 this far into the season. And it's like now people are starting to see what it's like when you put a good player with a bad surrounding cast or supporting cast. This is normal. And we've been saying this for years for so many other teams. You can have the best quarterback in the world, but if the running game isn't there to assist and take pressure off, if the offensive line isn't there to keep them upright and protected, this is what is going to continue to transpire. The time of possession, Baltimore had the ball way longer than Tampa. Third down conversions. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. It just, what are the Bucs supposed to do? You lose to a bad team in Carolina, you go on short rest, and you come home, and you're playing against the Ravens, who are also kind of up and down in certain points of the season, and they just absolutely run all over you. The Buccaneers were one of the best rush defenses in the league over the last 5 seasons. And you get blown out by 231 rushing yards, Kyle. That's like, those are Madden numbers. Those are like collegiate numbers. And it was like even all across the board. Now, I know that, Justice Hill ended with 28 and the top rusher had 65, but I mean, everybody was averaging over 4 yards per carry. Justice Hill was at 7 yards a carry. Duvernay at 16.5. Lamar Jackson at 4.8. Kenyon Drake's 8.9. Gus Edwards 5.9. They were getting massive chunks per run. That's huge. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They were able to keep the ball away from the freaking Buccaneers. They drained the clock, time of possession, like I had stated. So outside of Mike Evans having 123 yards, most of it coming off of a 51-yard reception, the Buccaneers just could not move the ball. Julio Jones looks completely different since coming back from injury. I mean, we're looking at Chris Godwin. Thank God he had 6 for 75. But again, between Godwin and Evans, they had 22 targets. That's the majority of the offense. The next supporting cast in terms of having the most targets was Cade Otton. I don't even know who the hell that guy is. It must be a backup third-string tight end or something because ain't nobody else was getting open. So the Bucs are struggling in multiple phases. They're 1-3 at home. They are now out of first place in the division. I don't necessarily know if they can salvage it unless this offensive line decides to wake up. Similar to the Colts issues, they have a good supporting cast around them in terms of on paper, but they can't get it together. So I know that the Bucs defense will turn around when they get some healthy players back. I'm not worried about that. It's the offense. We've been saying it's the offense for weeks. And until they protect Tom Brady and they start to run the ball, I don't know, man. We're talking about Byron Leftwich, who is regarded as one of the better play callers since Tom has been in Tampa. He hasn't looked very good this season, and they have not been addressing that run game. It looks like they've been getting worse and worse every week, and they are last in yards per carry this season. Doesn't look like they're changing because they're always playing from behind. So unless they get a little bit of a change in how they're going to play call the system, I think that the Bucs are going to continue to struggle, and I think that this could be Tom Brady's last year.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed it on the head. I mean, when it comes to the Ravens and the Bucs game, I mean, we did pick the Ravens to win this game, and I think it was pretty simple. The reason why that we picked the Ravens over the Bucs, we just don't have faith in the Bucs offense to be able to put up points. And I understand that there were 22 points scored by Tampa in this one, but there were large stretches of that game where they just couldn't move the ball. They couldn't convert on third down. They had to punt it back to the Ravens. And there were multiple times where Brady looked frustrated. He just looked like he was completely done with how the offense was performing. I mean, he is getting really frustrated. I mean, it's not just like where he's getting slightly annoyed anymore. I mean, it's plainly visible that he's just fed up with the lack of consistency on the offensive side of the ball. And I mean, Kev, they lost 3 straight games. And, to me, this is a toss up game because obviously you have to respect Lamar Jackson and just the threat that he brings offensively, just with his ability to be able to stretch plays with his feet. But man, I'm looking at these games with the Bucs. Man, they probably should have beaten the Steelers. They sure as shit should have beaten the Panthers. And then you lose to the Ravens at home. Granted, it is on short rest, but sitting at a 3-5 record, I know we were kind of talking about it last week. These guys are in trouble. The Bucs are in real trouble here. And when I look at the Bucs' remaining schedule here, let's just go over the next couple of weeks. They got to play the Rams at home on November 6th. Then they play the Seahawks, which that is not going to be an easy game because the Seahawks have actually been somewhat of a decent team this year. And then you got the Browns. And then you have a divisional game against the Saints the week after. So, just based off of how the Bucs have been playing this year, these games are not easy ones. Had this been the Bucs team from last year, I would say that the Bucs would easily win at least 3 or 4 of these games. But I'm looking at that slate with the teams that I said that they're going up against. They might be lucky to split, 2 of those games. It might be 2-2 after that 4 to 5 week stretch that I brought up. And when I look at the Bucs offense, I just keep focusing on the offense because, Kev, I think you were 100% correct when it came to just the amount of injuries that the defense was dealing with. They just weren't prepared with the personnel that they had just because so many starters were out of the lineup for the Bucs going into that Ravens game. But offensively, man, this team just hurts to watch. I mean, they got off to a decent start. They got a touchdown in the first quarter. I think that was actually the first time that they scored a touchdown in the first quarter of the entire season. I mean, you're 8 weeks in and you score your first touchdown in the first quarter. That's crazy. Like, that should have taken place probably a month and a half ago. But, here we are. And Kev, you're exactly right with the Bucs not being able to run the ball effectively, but that's just because the offensive line can't protect Tom and they can't open up run lanes for Leonard Fournette and the boys in the running back group. And, that's why the Bucs are in last place when it comes to running the ball. I don't know if it's an issue of play calling per se. I think it's a confidence issue. The offensive personnel know that the offensive line cannot open up run lanes for Leonard Fournette. And then when they're going back to pass, well, let's face it, the defense knows that the Bucs are probably going to pass the ball more times than not just because they know that the run game has not been effective for them this year. And they have no reason to really stack the box that heavily outside of maybe first and second down because they know on third down, if it's anything past like a 3rd and 5, going to like a 3rd and 10 when it comes to the down and distance. I mean, the defense, they could drop 7 back in coverage and then the 4 pass rushers could just peel their ears back and they're just going to run straight for Tom. And I know that he got sacked 3 times in this game, but I think, sacks don't really tell the whole story here. There were many times where Tom was getting pressured, where he was getting hurried, where he had to get the ball out quick just because, I mean, let's face it, that Baltimore pass rush was on him multiple times throughout that game. And I just think it's getting to the point where Tom is just fed up with just the lack of effectiveness and the lack of consistency that this offense is able to do. And to be fair to Tom, he's lucky that he only has 1 interception this year. And he got away with some in that Ravens game. And it's not the first time. There were some passes against Carolina last week where he got away with some. But had Tom been turning the ball over 2 to 3 times in some of these games, I mean, these games would look absolutely worse than what the results have been the last couple of weeks. I mean, there would have been a good chance had Tom turned the ball over twice against Carolina last week that Carolina could win that game by 30 points. And more than likely, had that same type of outcome played itself out against the Ravens, where he turns the ball over a couple times, the Ravens probably put up damn near 35, 40 points in this game. So he is kind of helping out the team by not turning the ball over and making things worse. But I just think Tom is just in a situation where he can't get this team out of a rut. And I think it really just kind of goes back to the offensive line. But I have to say, Tom did not look good in this game. There were some passes that he missed that probably should have been completions, some of which should have been touchdowns. And I just don't know how they're going to be able to get back into a rhythm until the offensive line issues are corrected. And I don't know if they are going to be at this point. We were talking about lowering the expectations when it came to the Bucs last week after they lost to the Panthers. And I think, we're going to have to keep lowering those expectations. 2 games under 500. They're no longer in first place in the NFC South. And I don't know if there's really any sort of viable path here for them to really get on a hot streak, just because the personnel issues, I think, are too deep at this point. We are 8 weeks into the season, so this is technically, we're getting to that halfway point of the season. So maybe they could look back these first 2 months of the year and just put them in the rearview mirror and then just absolutely turn it up in the second half of the year. But I don't see it. They got to show me something first before I could even believe a notion like that. And I'm just going to round it out with this. I'm like, they're in trouble. They are in deep trouble. And I never envisioned this happening. I knew that there were some issues with the offensive line. I did not think it was going to be this bad. But here we are.